Welcome in. Let's get our sounds going. Look at that. I have movement in my picture now. I heard it before but didn't know the title. Thank you. Alright. No problem. Yeah, I did put a widget in the top right-hand corner, but I don't always know if it works for, like, songs. I'm trying. I'm doing my best out here, guys. I'll cut the kettle short to be able to come back to the tea. I'm still hot enough. It's just plenty hot. Friends. The tea was good. We're good. Alright, well, we're going to continue with Something Wicked This Way Comes. We're on chapter 36. I am getting some dropped frames. Hopefully they don't continue too much. I'm going to close a few programs here, just in case. So I would like that to not happen. Alright. Last time... Oh, it's been a hot minute. Last time, we left Will and Jim hiding under a grate, and they watched as Will's dad was approached by the illustrated man, and they had a small confrontation. And then, Will's dad told him to go hide for the rest of the day and to meet him in the library. So that's where we're at. Alright. Chapter 36. The dwarf, bearing his demented and wildly lighted eyes, made his way south on Main Street. Stopping suddenly, he developed a film strip in his head, scanned it, bleated, and blundered back through the forest of legs to reach for and pull the illustrated man down where a whisper was as good as a shout. Mr. Dark listened, then fled, leaving the dwarf far behind. Reaching the cigar store Indian, the illustrated man sank to his knees. Clutching a steel lattice grill, he peered down in the pit. Below lay yellow newspapers, wilted candy wrappers, burnt cigars and gum. Mr. Dark's cry was muffled fury. Lose something? Mr. Tetley blinked over his counter. The illustrated man clenched the grate and nodded once. I clean under the grate once a month for the money, said Mr. Tetley. How much you lose? Dime? Quarter? Half a dollar? Bing! The illustrated man glared up. In the cash register, a small red fire sign jumped high. No sale. Chapter 37. The town clock struck 7. The echoes of the great chime wandered in the unlit halls of the library. An autumn leaf, very crisp, fell somewhere in the dark. But it was only the page of a book, turning. Off in one of the catacombs, bent to a table under a grass green-shaded lamp, lips pursed and eyes narrowed, sat Charles Holloway, his hands trembling the pages, lifting, rearranging the books. Now and then he hurried off to peer into the autumn night, watchful of the streets. Then again he came back to paper-clipped pages, to insert papers, to scribble out quotations, whispering to himself. His voice brought forth quick echoes from the library vaults. Look here, here, said the night passages. This picture, said the halls. And this, the dust settled. It had been the longest day of all the days he could remember in his life. He had mingled with strange and not-so-strange crowds. He had searched after the searchers in the wake of the wide, scattering parade. He had resisted telling Jim's mother, Will's mother, more than they needed to know for a happy Sunday. And meantime, crossed shadows with Dwarf, traded nods with Pinhead and Fire Eater, kept free of shadowed alleys, and controlled his panic when, doubling back, he saw the basement pit empty under the cigar store grill and knew the boys were at hide-and-seek somewhere nearby, or somewhere, praise God, very far away. Then, in the crowds, he moved to the carnival ground, stayed out of tents, stayed free of rides, observed, watched the sun go down, and just at twilight, surveyed the cold glass waters of the mirror maze, and saw just enough on the shore to pull him back before he drowned. Wet all over and cold to the bone before night caught him, he let the crowd protect, warm, and bear him away up into town, to the library, and to most important books, which he arranged in a great literary clock on a table like someone learning to tell a new time. So he paced round and round, the huge clock squinting at the yellowed pages, as if they were moth wings pinned dead to the wood. Here lay a portrait of the Prince of Darkness. Next, a series of fantastic sketches of the temptations of St. Anthony. Next, some etchings of the Bazaar by Giovanbattista Rosselli. I don't know if I said that right, but I tried. Depicting a set of curious toys, human-like robots engaged in various alchemical rituals. Rites. At 5 minutes to 12 stood a copy of Dr. Faustus. At 2 lay an occult iconography. At 6, under Mr. Holloway's trailed fingers now, a history of circuses, carnivals, shadow shows, puppet menageries, inhabited by mountebanks, minstrels, stilt-walking sorcerers, and their fantoccini. More, a manual of the air kingdoms, things that fly down history. At 9 sharp, by demons possessed, lay atop Egyptian philtres, lying atop the torments of the damned, which in turn crushed flat the spell of mirrors. Very late, up the literary clock, one named Locomotives and Trains, the mystery of sleep between midnight and dawn, the witch's Sabbath, and pacts with demons. It was all laid out. You could see the face. But there were no hands on this clock. He could not tell what hour of the night of life it was for himself, the boys, or the unknowing town. For in sum, what had he to go by? A 3 o'clock in the morning arrival, a grotesque-looking glass maze, a Sunday parade, a tall man with a swarm of electric blue pictures itching on his sweaty hide, a few drops of blood falling down through a pavement grill, 2 frightened boys staring up out of the earth, and himself, alone, in a mausoleum quiet, nudging the puzzle together. What was there about the boys that made him believe the simplest word they whispered up through the grill? Fear itself was proof here, and he had seen enough in his life to know it, like the smell from a butcher's shop in summer twilight. What was there about the Illustrated Carnival owner's silences? It spoke thousands of violent, corrupt, and crippling words. What was there in that old man he had seen through a tent flap late this afternoon, seated in a chair with the words Mr. Electrico bannered over him, power webbing and crawling on his flesh like green lizards? All of it. And now these books. This. He touched physiognomy. That one's beyond me, I'm sorry. The secrets of the individual's character is found in his face. Where Jim and Will then featured all angelic, pure, half-innocent, peering up through the sidewalk at marching terror. Did the boys represent the ideal for your woman, man, or child of excellent bearing, color, balance, and summer disposition? Conversely, Charles Holloway turned a page. Did the scurrying freaks, the illustrated man, bear the foreheads of the irascible, the cruel, the covetous, the mouths of the lewd and untruthful, the teeth of the crafty, the unstable, the audacious, the vainglorious, and your murderous beast? No. The book slipped shut. If faces were judged, the freaks were no worse than many he'd seen slipping from the library late nights in his long career. There was only one sure thing. 2 lines of Shakespeare said it. You should write them down in the middle of the clock of books to fix the heart of his apprehension. By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. So vague, yet so immense. He did not want to live with it. Yet he knew that, during this night, unless he lived with it very well, he might have to live with it all the rest of his life. At the window he looked out and thought, Jim, Will, are you coming? Will you get here? Waiting, his flesh took paleness from his bones. Oh, the ambience is loud. Thank you for letting me know. How about there? Hopefully that's good. I just realized that I didn't shut off any of my sound alerts. So I'm really gonna trust you guys to not press those buttons. My voice is up as loud as it can go. I'll turn it down a little bit more for you. Is that better? Okay. Wonderful. Yeah. Because I also need to talk quietly for these ones, or else I will lose my voice very quickly. So, everything's as loud as it can be. For my voice, anyway. Chapter 38. The library, then, at 7:15, 7:30, 7:45 of a Sunday night, cloistered with the great drifts of silence and transfixed avalanche of books, poised like the cuneiform stones of eternity on shelves, so high the unseen snows of time fell all year there. Outside, the town breathed back and forth to the carnival, hundreds of people passing near where Jim and Will lay strewn on bushes to one side of the library, now ducking up, now ducking down to nose raw earth. Cheese it, both smothered in grass. Across the street there passed what could have been a boy, could have been a dwarf, could have been a boy with a dwarf mind, could have been anything blown along like scuttle crab leaves on the frost mica sidewalks. But then, whatever it was went away. Jim sat up. Will still lay face buried in the good safe dirt. Come on, what's wrong? The library, said Will. I'm even afraid of it now. All the books, he thought, perched there, hundreds of years old, peeling skin, leaning on each other like 10 million vultures, walk along the dark stacks and all the gold titles shine their eyes at you. Between old carnival, old library, and his own father, everything old, well... I know Dad's in there, but is it Dad? I mean, what if they came, changed him, made him bad, promised him something they can't give, but he thinks they can, and we go in there, and some day, 50 years from now, someone opens a book in there, and you and me drop out like 2 dry moth wings on the floor, Jim. Someone pressed and hit us between pages, and no one ever guessed where we went. This was too much for Jim, who had to do something to flog his spirits. Next thing Will knew, Jim was hammering on the library door. Both hammered, frantic to jump from this night to that warmer book-breathing night inside. Given a choice of darkness, this one was better. The oven smell of books as the door opened and Dad stood with his ghost-colored hair. They tiptoed back through the deserted corridors, Will feeling a crazy urge to whistle as he often did past the graveyard at sundown. Dad asking what made them late, and they trying to remember all the places they hid in one day. They had hidden old garages. They had hidden old barns. They had hidden the highest trees they could climb and got bored, and boredom was worse than fear, so they came down and reported in to the police chief and had a fine chat, which gave them 20 safe minutes right in the station. And Will got the idea of touring churches, and they climbed all the steeples in town and scared pigeons off of the belfries. And whether or not it was safer in churches, and especially up with the bells or not, no one could claim, but it felt safe. But there again, they began to get starchy with boredom and fatigued with sameness, and were almost to the point of giving themselves up to the carnival in order to have something to do, when fortunately the sun went down. From sundown to now, it had taken a wonderful time creeping upon the library as if it were a once friendly fort that might now be manned by Arabs. So here we are, whispered Jim, and stopped. Why am I whispering? It's after hours. Heck! He laughed, then stopped, for he thought he heard a soft tread in the subterranean vaults. but it was only his laughter walking back through the deep stacks on panther feet. So when they talked again, it was still in whispers. Deep forests, dark caves, dim churches, half-lit libraries were all the same. They tuned you down, they dampened your ardor. They brought you to murmurs and soft cries for fear of raising up phantom twins of your voice which might haunt corridors long after your passage. They reached a small room and circled the table on which Charles Holloway had laid out the books, where he had read many hours and for the first time looked at each other's faces and saw a dreadful paleness, so did not comment. From the beginning, Will's father pulled out chairs. Please. So each taking his part, in their good time, the boys told of the wandering by lightning rod salesman, the predictions of storms to come, the long after midnight train, the suddenly inhabited meadow, the moon-blown tents, the untouched but full-wept Calliope. Then the light of noon showering in over an ordinary midway, with hundreds of Christians wandering through, but no lines for them to be tossed to, only the maze where time has lost itself backward and forward in waterfall mirrors, only the out-of-order carousel, the dead supper hour, Mr. Cougar and the boy with the eyes that had seen all the glistery tripes of the world shaped like hung and dripping sins, and all the sins tenterhooked and running red and verminous. This boy with the eyes of a man who has lived forever, seen too much, might like to die, but doesn't know how. The boys stopped for breath. Miss Foley, the carnival again, the carousel run wild, the ancient cougar mummy gasping moonlight exhaling silver dust, dead then resurrected in a chair where green lightning struck his skeleton alight. All of it a storm minus rain, minus thunder, the parade, the cigar store basement, the hiding, and at last them here finished, done with the telling. For a long moment, Will's father sat staring blinding into the center of the table. Then his lips moved. Jim, Will, he said, I believe. The boys sank in their chairs. All of it? All. Will wiped his eyes. Boy, he said gruffly, I'm going to start bawling. We got no time for that, said Jim. No time. And Will's father stood up, stuffed his pipe with tobacco, rummaged his pockets for matches, and brought out a battered harmonica, a penknife, a cigar lighter that wouldn't work, and a memo pad he had always meant to write great thoughts down on but never got around to, and lined these weapons for a pygmy war that could be lost before it even started. Probing this idle refuse, shaking his head, he finally found a tattered matchbox, lit his pipe, and began to muse, pacing the room. Looks like we're going to do a lot of talking about one particular carnival. Where's it come from? Where's it going? What's it up to? We never thought it hit town before, yet, by God, look here. He tapped a yellowed newspaper, ad dated October 12th, 1888, and ran his fingernail along under this. J.C. Cougar and G.M. Dark present the Pandemonium Theatre Co. Combined Sideshows and Unnatural Museums International. J.C. G.M., said Jim. Those are the same initials as on the throwaways around town this week. But it couldn't be the same men. No. Will's father rubbed his elbows. My goose pimples run counter to that. He laid forth other old newspapers. 1860, 1846, same ad, same names, same initials. Dark and Cougar, Cougar and Dark, they came and went, but only once every 20, 30, 40 years. So people forgot. Where were they all the other years? Traveling. More traveling. Always in October. October 1846, October 1860, October 1888, October 1910, and October now tonight. His voice trailed off. Beware the autumn people. Gulliver. Sir, I'm trying to do a thing. Well, come up here then. Dude. Are you just gonna yell at me? Hold on. I'm waiting. Well, come up here. There you go. Alright, cat break. You make yourself comfy. His voice trailed off. Beware the autumn people. What? An old religious tract. Pastor Newgate Phillips, I think. Read it as a boy. How does it go again? He tried to remember. He licked his lips. He did remember. For some, autumn comes early. Stays late through life where October follows September and November touches October. And then instead of December and Christ's birth, there is no Bethlehem star, no rejoicing, but September comes again on old October, and so on down the years, with no winter, spring, or revivifying summer. For these beings, fall is the ever-normal season, the only weather. There be no choice beyond. Where do they come from? The dust. Where do they go? The grave. Does blood stir their veins? No, the night wind. What ticks in their head? The worm. What speaks from their mouth? The toad. What sees from their eye? The snake. What hears with their ear? The abyss between the stars. They sift the human storm for souls, eat flesh of reason, fill tombs with sinners. They frenzy forth in gusts, they beetle scurry, creep, thread, filter, motion, make all moons sullen, and surely cloud all clear-run waters. The spider web hears them, trembles, breaks. Such are the autumn people. Beware of them. After a pause, both boys exhaled at once. The autumn people, said Jim. That's them, sure. Then, Will swallowed. Does that make us summer people? Not quite. Charles Holloway shook his head. Oh, you're nearer summer than me. If I was ever a rare fine summer person, that's long ago. Most of us are half and half. The August noon in us works to stave off the November chills. We survive by what little 4th of July wits we've stashed away, but there are times when we're all autumn people. Not you, Dad. Not you, Mr. Holloway. He turned quick to see both appraising him, paleness next to paleness, hands on knees as if to bolt. It's a way of speaking. Easy, boys. I'm after the facts. Will, do you really know your dad? Shouldn't you know me, and me you, if it's gonna be us'ns against thems? Hey, yeah, breathed Jim. Who are you? We know who he is, darn it, Will protested. Do we? Said Will's father. Let's see. Charles William Holloway. Nothing extraordinary about me except I'm 54, which is always extraordinary to the man inside it. Born in Sweetwater, lived in Chicago, survived in New York, rooted in Detroit, floundered in lots of places, arrived here late after living in libraries around the country all those years because I liked being alone, liked matching up in books what I'd seen on the roads. Then, in the middle of all the running away, which I called travel, in my 39th year, your mother fixed me with one glance and been here ever since. Still most comfortable in the library nights and out of the rain of people. Is this my last stop? Chances are. Why am I here at all? Right now, it seems. To help you. He paused and looked at the two boys and their fine, young faces. Yes, he said. Very late in the game. To help you. Chapter 39. Every night-blind library window chattered with cold. The two boys waited for the wind to pass away. Then Will said, Dad, you've always helped. Thanks, but it's not true. Charles Holloway examined one empty hand. I'm a fool, always looking over your shoulder to see what's coming instead of right at you to see what's here. But then, for what salve it gives me, every man's a fool. Which means you got to pitch in all your life, bail out, board over, tie rope, patch plaster, pat cheeks, kiss brows, laugh, cry, make do against the day you're the worst fool of all, and shout, "Help!" Then all you need is one person's answer. I see it so clear. Across the country tonight lie cities, towns, and mere jerkwater stops of fools. So the carnival steams by, shakes any tree. It rains jackasses. Separate jackasses, I should say, individuals with no one they think or no one actual to answer their help. Unconnected fools. That's the harvest the carnival comes smiling after with its threshing machine. "Oh gosh," said Will, "it's hopeless." No. The very fact we're here worrying about the difference between summer and autumn makes me sure there's a way out. You don't have to stay foolish. You don't have to be wrong, evil, sinful, whatever you want to call it. There's more than 3 or 4 choices. They, that dark fellow and his friends, don't hold all the cards. I could tell that today at the cigar store. I'm afraid of him, but I could see he was afraid of me. So there's fear on both sides. Now, how can we use it to advantage? How? First things first. Let's bone up on history. If men wanted to stay bad forever, they could have. Agreed? Agreed. Did we stay out in the fields with the beasts? No. In the water with the barracuda? No. Somewhere we let go of the hot gorilla's paw. Somewhere we turned in our carnivore's teeth and started chewing blades of grass. We've been working mulch as much as blood into our philosophy for quite a few lifetimes. Since then we measured ourselves up the scale from apes, but not half so high as angels. It was a nice new idea, and we were afraid we'd lose it. So we put it on paper and built buildings like this one around it. And we've been going in and out of these buildings, chewing it over at that one new sweet blade of grass, trying to figure out how it all started, when we made the move, when we decided to be different. I suppose one night, hundreds of thousands of years ago in a cave by a night fire, when one of those shaggy men wakened to gaze over the banked coals at his woman, his child, and thought of their being cold, dead, gone forever, then he must have wept. And when he put out his hand in the night to the woman who must die some day, and to the children who must follow her, and for a little bit next morning, he treated them somewhat better, for he saw that they, like himself, had the seed of night in them. He felt that seed like slime in his pulse, splitting and making more against the day they would multiply his body into darkness. So that man, the first one, knew what we know now. Our hour is short, eternity is long. With this knowledge came pity and mercy. So we spared others for the later more intricate, more mysterious benefits of love. Oh, I'm still dropping frames. What? Why? Don't do this to me. Are you guys doing good? I can't, with OBS I can't see if there are viewers, but I'm assuming there are people here. And if you guys are good, great. We're only at 2% dropped frames, but still, it's from the 0 I had the other day, it's still annoying. Not a problem? Okay. Thank you so much for the lurk, Campbell. I appreciate it so much. So, in sum, what are we? We are the creatures that know, and know too much. That leaves us with such a burden. Again, we have a choice to laugh or cry. No other animal does either. We do both, depending on the season and the need. Somehow I feel the carnival watches to see which we're doing and why, and how, and moves in on us when it feels we're ripe. Charles Holloway stopped, for the boys were watching him so intently he suddenly had to turn, flushing, away. "Boy, Mr. Holloway," cried Jim softly. "That's great. Go on." "Dad," said Will, amazed, "I never knew you could talk." "You should hear me here late nights. Nothing but talk." Charles Holloway shook his head. "Yes, you should have heard. I should have said more to you any day you name in the past. Hell, where was I? Leading up to love, I think. Yes. Love. Will looked bored. Jim looked wary of the word. And these looks gave Charles Holloway pause. What could he say that might make sense to them? Could he say love was, above all, common sense? Or, above all, common cause, shared experience? That was the vital cement, wasn't it? Could he say how he felt about their all being here tonight in this wild world running around a big sun, which fell through a much bigger space, falling through yet a vaster immensities of space, maybe toward, maybe away from something? Could he say we share this billion-mile-an-hour ride? We have common cause against the night. You start with little common causes. Why love the boy in a March field with his kite braving the sky? Because our fingers burn with the hot string singeing our hands. Why love some girl viewed from a train bent to a country well? The tongue remembers iron water cool on some long-lost afternoon. Why weep at strangers dead by the road? They resemble friends unseen in 40 years. Why laugh when clowns are hit by pies? We taste custard, we taste life. Why love the woman who is your wife? Her nose breathes in the air of the world that I know. Therefore I love that nose. Her ears hear music I might sing half the night through. Therefore I love her ears. Her eyes delight in seasons of the land, and so I love those eyes. Her tongue knows quiche, peach, chokeberry, mint, and lime. I love to hear it speaking. Because her flesh knows heat, cold, affliction, I know fire, snow, and pain. Shared, and once again shared experience. Billions of prickling textures. Cut one sense away, cut part of life away. Cut two senses, life halves itself on the instant. We love what we know. We love what we are. Common cause. Common cause. Common cause of mouth, eye, ear, tongue, hand, nose, flesh, heart, and soul. But how to say it? Look, he tried. Put two men in a rail car. One a soldier and the other a farmer. One talks war, the other wheat, and bore each other to sleep. But let one spell long distance running. And if the other once ran the mile, why, those men will run all night, like boys sparking a friendship up from memory. So all men have one business in common, women, and can talk till sunrise and beyond, hell. Charles Holloway stopped, flushed, self-conscious again, knowing vaguely there was a target up ahead, but not quite how to get there. He chewed his lips. Dad, don't stop, thought Will. When you talk, it's swell in here. You'll save us. Go on. The man saw his son's eyes, saw the same look in Jim, and walked slowly around the table, touching a night beast here, a clutch of ragged crones there, a star, a crescent moon, an antique sun, an hourglass that told time with bone dust instead of sand. Have I said anything I started out to say about being good? God, I don't know. A stranger's shot in the street, you hardly move to help, but if half an hour before you spent just 10 minutes with the fellow and knew a little about him and his family, you might just jump in front of his killer and try and stop it. Really knowing is good. Not knowing or refusing to know is bad, or immoral at least. You can't act if you don't know. Acting without knowing takes you right off the cliff. God, you must think I'm crazy this talk. Probably think we should be out there, duck shooting, elephant gunning balloons like you did, Will. But we got to know all there is to know, about those freaks and that man heading them up. We can't be good unless we know what bad is, and it's a shame we're working against time. Show will close and the crowds will go home early on a Sunday night. I feel we'll have a visit from the autumn people then. That gives us maybe 2 hours. Jim was at the window now, looking out across the town to the far black tents and the calliope that played by the turning of the world at night in the night. Is it bad? He asked. Bad? Cried Will angrily. Bad? You ask that? Calmly, said Will's father. A good question. Part of that show looks great, and from the old saying, but the old saying really applies. You can't get something for nothing. Fact is, from them, you get nothing for something. They make you empty promises. You stick out your neck and wham. Where'd they come from? Asked Jim. Who are they? Will went to the window with his father, and they both looked out, and Charles Holloway said to those far tents, Maybe once it was just one man walking across Europe, jingling his ankle bells, a lute on his shoulder, making a hunchback shadow before Columbus. Maybe a man walked around in a monkey skin 1,000,000 years ago, stuffing himself with other people's unhappiness, chewed their pain all day like spearmint gum for the sweet savor, and trotted faster, revivified by personal disaster. Maybe his son after him refined his father's deadfalls, man-traps, bone crunchers, headachers, flesh twitchers, soul skinners. These laid the scum on lonely ponds, from which came vinegar nets to snuff up noses, mosquitoes to ride summer night flesh and sting forth those bumps that carnival phrenologists dearly loved to fondle and prophesy upon. So from one man here, one man there, walking as swiftly as his oily glances, it became scuttles of dogmen, begging gifts of trouble, pandering misery, seeking under carpets for centipede treads, watchful of night sweats, hearkening by all bedroom doors to hear men twist, basting themselves with remorse and warm water dreams. The stuff of nightmare is their plain bread. They butter it with pain. They set their clocks by death-watch beetles and thrive the centuries. They were the men with the leather ribbon whips, who sweated up the pyramid, seasoning it with other people's salt and other people's cracked hearts. They coursed Europe on the white horses of the plague. They whispered to Caesar that he was mortal, then sold daggers at half price in the Grand March sale. Some must have been lazing clowns, foot props for emperors, princes, and epileptic popes. Then, out on the road, gypsies and time, their population grew as the world grew, spread, and there was more delicious variety of pain to thrive on. The train put wheels under them, and here they run down the long road out of the Gothic and Baroque. Look at their wagons and coaches, the carnival like medieval shrines, all of it stuff once drawn by horses, mules, or maybe men. All those years, Jim's voice swallowed itself. The same people. You think Mr. Cougar and Mr. Dark are both a couple 100 years old? Riding the merry-go-round, they can shave off a year or two any time they want, right? Why then, the abyss opened at Will's feet. They could live forever. And hurt people. Jim turned it over again and again. But why? Why all the hurt? Because, said Mr. Holloway, you need fuel, gas, something to run a carnival on, don't you? Women live off gossip, and what's gossip but a swap of headaches, sour spit and arthritic bones, ruptured and mended flesh, indiscretions, storms of madness, calms after storms. If some people don't have something juicy to chew on, their choppers would prolapse, their souls with them. Multiply their pleasure at funerals, their chuckling through breakfast obituaries. Add all the catfight marriages where folks spend careers ripping skin off each other and patching it back up upside down. Add quack doctors, slicing persons to read their guts like tea leaves, then sewing them tight with finger-printed thread. Square the whole dynamite factory by 10 quadrillion, and you get the black candle powder of this one carnival. All the meanness we harbor. They borrow it in redoubled spades. They're 1,000,000,000 times itchier for pain, sorrow, and sickness than the average man. We salt our lives with other people's sins. Our flesh to us tastes sweet, but the carnival doesn't care if it stinks by moonlight instead of sun, so long as it gorges itself on fear and pain. That's the fuel. The vapor that spins, the carousel, the raw stuffs of terror, the excruciating agony of guilt, the scream from real or imagined wounds. The carnival sucks that gas, ignites it, and chugs along its way. Charles Holloway took a breath, shut his eyes, and said, "How do I know this? I don't. I feel it. I taste it. It was like old leaves burning on the wind 2 nights ago. It was a smell like mortuary flowers. I hear that music, I hear what you tell me, and half of what you don't tell me. Maybe I've always dreamt about such carnivals, and was just waiting for it to come so as to see it once and nod. Now that tent show plays my bones like a marimba. My skeleton knows. It tells me. I tell you. Hey, Saj, welcome in. Shouldn't you be in bed? Shouldn't you be asleep? Go to sleep. I'm pretty sure you should be asleep. Tea drinking time. Hold on. Okay. Chapter 40. Can they, said Jim, do they, buy souls? Buy when they can get them free? Said Mr. Holloway. Why, most men jump at the chance to give up everything for nothing. There's nothing we're so slapstick with as our own immortal souls. Besides, you're inferring that that's the devil out there. Hey, Lumberschnoodle, welcome in. Yeah, this is a good spooky story for Halloween. I'm going to sleep, bye. Good. Go to sleep. Alright. There's nothing we're so slapstick with as our own immortal souls. Besides, you're inferring that's the devil out there. I only say it's the type of creature has learned to live off souls, not the souls themselves. That always worried me in the old myths. I asked myself, why would Mephistopheles want a soul? What does he do with it when he gets it? Of what use is it? Stand back while I throw my own theory over the plate. Those creatures want the flaming gas off souls who can't sleep nights. That fever by day from old crimes. A dead soul has no kindling, but a live and raving soul, crisp with self-damnation. Oh, that's a pretty snoutful for such as them. How do I know this? I observe. The carnival is like people, only more so. A man, a woman, rather than walk away from or kill each other, ride each other a lifetime, pulling hair, extracting fingernails, the pain of each to the other like a narcotic that makes existence worth the day. So the carnival feels ulcerated, egos miles off and lopes to toast its hands at that ache. It smells boys ulcerating to be men, paining like great unwise wisdom teeth. 20,000 miles away, somewhere abed in winter nights, it feels the aggravation of middle-aged men like myself, who gibber after long-lost autumn afternoons to no avail. Need, want, desire, we burn those in our fluids, oxidize those in our souls, which jet streams out lips, nostrils, ears, eyes, broadcast from antennae, fingers, long or short wave, God only knows, but the freak masters perceive itches and some crab clustering to scratch. It's traveled a long way on an easy map, with people handy by every crossroad to lend it lustful pints of agony to power it on. So maybe the carnival survives, living off the poison of the sins we do to each other, and the ferment of our most terrible regrets. Charles Holloway snorted. Good grief. How much have I said out loud, how much to myself in the last 10 minutes? You, said Jim, talk a lot. In what language, damn it? Cried Charles Holloway, for suddenly it seemed he had done no more than other nights, walking exquisitely alone, deliciously propounding his ideas to halls which echoed them once, then made them vanish forever. He had written books, a lifetime, on the airs of vast rooms and vast buildings, and had it all fly out the vents. Now it all seemed fireworks, done for color, sound, the high architecture of words to dazzle the boys, powder his ego, but with no mark left on retina or mind after the color and sound faded. Mere exercise and self-declamation. Sheepishly, he accosted himself. How much of this got through? 1 sentence out of 5? 2 out of 8? 3 in 1,000, said Will. Charles Holloway could not but laugh and sigh in one. Then Jim cut across with, Is it death? The carnival? The old man lit his pipe. Blew smoke, seriously studied the patterns. No. But I think it uses death as a threat. Death doesn't exist. It never did, it never will, but we've drawn so many pictures of it, so many years trying to pin it down, comprehend it. We've got to thinking of it as an entity strangely alive and greedy. All it is, however, is a stopped watch, a loss, an end, a darkness. Nothing. And the carnival wisely knows we're more afraid of nothing than we are of something. You can fight something, but nothing? Where do you hit it? Has it a heart, soul, butt behind, brain? No. So the carnival just shakes a great cropier's cupful of nothing at us. And reaps us as we tumble back head over heels in fright. Oh, it shows us something that might eventually lead to nothing, all right. That flourish of mirrors out there in the meadow, that's a raw something for sure. Enough to knock your soul sideways in the saddle. It's a hit below the belt to see yourself 90 years gone, the vapors of eternity rising from you like breath off dry ice. Then, when it's frozen, you stiff, it plays that fine, sweet, soul-searching music that smells of fresh-washed frocks of women dancing on backyard lines in May. That sounds like haystacks trampled into wine, all that blue sky and summer night on the lake kind of tune until your head bangs with the drums that look like full moons beating around the calliope. Simplicity. Lord, I do admire their direct approach. Hit an old man with mirrors and watch his pieces fall in jigsaws of ice only the carnival can put back together. How? Well, it's around back on the carousel to beautiful Ohio or Merry Widow. But they're careful not to tell one thing to people who go riding to its music. What? Asked Jim. Why, that if you're a miserable sinner in one shape, you're a miserable sinner in another. Changing size doesn't change the brain. If I made you 25 tomorrow, Jim, your thoughts would still be boy thoughts, and it'd show. Or if they turned me into a boy of 10 this instant, my brain would still be 50, and that boy would act funnier and older and weirder than any boy ever. Then, too, times I'd have joined another way. Which way? Asked Will. If I become younger, all my friends would still be 50, 60, wouldn't they? I'd be cut off from them, forever. For I couldn't tell them what I'd up and done, could I? They'd resent it. They'd hate me. Their interests would no longer be mine, would they? Especially their worries. Sickness and death for them, new life for me. So where's the place in this world for a man who looks 20 but who is older than Methuselah? What man could stand the shock of a change like that? Carnival won't warn you it's equal post-operative shock, but by God, I bet it is. And more. So what happens? You get your reward. Madness. Change of body, change of personal environment for one thing. Guilt for another. Guilt at leaving your wife, husband, friends, to die the way all men die. Lord, that alone would give a man fits. So more fear, more agony for the carnival to breakfast on. So with the green vapors coming off your stricken conscience, you say you want to go back to the way you were. Carnival nods and listens. Yes, they promise. If you behave as they say, in a short while they'll give you back your 210 or whatever, on the promise alone of being returned to normal old age. That train travels with the world. It's sideshow, populated with madmen waiting to be released from bondage. Meantime servicing the carnival, giving it coke for its ovens. Will murmured something. What? Miss Foley, mourned Will. Oh, Miss Foley, they got her now. Just like you say. Once she got what she wanted, it scared her. She didn't like it. Oh, she was crying so hard, Dad, so hard. Now I bet they promise her someday she can be 50 again if she'll mind. I wonder what they're doing with her right now. Oh, Dad. Oh, Jim. God help her. Will's father put a heavy hand out to trace the old carnival portraits. They've probably thrown her in with the freaks. And what are they? Sinners who've traveled so long, hoping for deliverance, they've taken on the shape of their original sins. The fat man? What was he once? If I can guess the carnival's sense of irony, the way they like to weight the scales, he was once a ravener of all kinds and varieties of lust. No matter. There he lives now, anyway. Collected up dust collected up in his bursting skin. The thin man, a skeleton, or whatever. Did he starve his wife's, children's spiritual as well as physical hungers? The dwarf? Was he or was he not your friend, the lightning rod salesman, always on the road, never settling, ever moving, facing no encounters, running ahead of the lightning, and selling rods, yes, but leaving others to face the storm? So maybe, through accident or design, when he fell in with the free rides, he shrank not to a boy, but a mean ball of grotesque tripes, all self-involved. The fortune-telling gypsy, dust witch. Maybe someone who lived always tomorrow and let today slide, like myself, and so wound up penalized having to guess other people's wild sunrises and sad sunsets. You tell me, you've seen her near. The pinhead, the sheep boy, the fire eater, the Siamese twins, good God, what were they? Twins all bound up in tandem narcissism? We'll never know. They'll never tell. We've guessed and probably guessed wrong on 10 dozen things in that last half hour. Now, some plan. Where do we go from here? Charles Holloway placed forth a map of the town and drew in the location of the carnival with a blunt pencil. Do we keep hiding out? No. With Miss Foley, so many others involved, we just can't. Well then, how do we attack so we won't be picked off first thing? What kind of weapons? Silver bullets! Cried Will suddenly. Heck no, snorted Jim. They're not vampires. If we were Catholic, we could borrow church, holy water, and... Nuts, said Jim. Movie stuff. It don't happen that way in real life. Am I wrong, Mr. Holloway? I wish you were, boy. Will's eyes glowed fiercely. Okay, only one thing to do. Trot down to the meadow with a couple gallons of kerosene and some matches. That's against the law, Jim exclaimed. Look who's talking. Hold on. But everyone stopped right then. Whisper. A faint tide of wind flowed up through the library corridors and into this room. The front door, Jim whispered. Someone just opened it. Far away, a gentle click. The draft that had for a moment stirred the boy's trouser cuffs and blown the man's hair ceased. Someone's just closed it. Silence. Just the great, dark library with its labyrinths and hedgerow mazes of sleeping books. Someone's inside. The boys half rose, bleeding in the backs of their mouths. Charles Holloway waited, then said one word softly. Hide. We can't leave you. Hide. The boys ran and vanished in the dark maze. Charles Holloway then, rigidly, slowly, breathing in, breathing out, forced himself to sit back down, his eyes on the yellowed newspapers, to wait, then again, to wait some more. Chapter 41. Oh, I am chugging this tea. Oh my god. Okay. 41. A shadow moved among shadows. Charles Holloway felt his soul submerge. It took a long time for the shadow, and the man it escorted, to come stand in the doorway of the room. The shadow seemed deliberate in its slowness, so as to shingle his flesh and cheese-grate his steadily willed calm. And when at last the shadow reached the door, it brought not one, not 100, but 1,000 people with it to look in. My name is Dark, said the voice. Charles Holloway let out 2 fistfuls of air. Better known as the Illustrated Man, said the voice. Where are the boys? Boys? Will's father turned at last to appraise the tall man who stood in the door. The illustrated man sniffed the yellow pollen that whiffed up from the ancient books as, quite suddenly, Will's father saw them laid out in full sight, leaped up, stopped, then began to close them one by one as casually as possible. The illustrated man pretended not to notice. The boys are not home. Those 2 houses are empty. What a shame. They'll miss those free rides. I wish I knew where they were. Charles Holloway started carrying the books to the shelves. Hell, if they knew you were here with free tickets, they'd shout for joy. Would they? Mr. Dark let his smile melt like a white and pink paraffin candy toy he no longer had appetite for. Softly, he said, I could kill you. Charles Holloway nodded, walking slowly. Did you hear what I said? Barked the illustrated man. Yes. Charles Holloway weighed the books as if they were his judgment. But you won't kill now. You're too smart. You've kept the show on the road a long time being smart. So you've read a few newspapers and think you know all about us? No. Not all. Just enough to scare me. Be more scared, then, said the crowd of night-crawling illustrations locked under the black suiting, speaking through the thin lips. One of my friends outside can fix you so it seems you died of most natural heart failure. The blood banged at Charles Holloway's heart, knocked his temples, tapped twice at his wrists. The witch, he thought. His lips must have formed the words. The witch, Mr. Dark nodded. The other shelved books, withholding one. Well, what have you there? Mr. Dark squinted. A Bible. How very charming. How childish and refreshingly old-fashioned. Have you ever read it, Mr. Dark? Read it? I've had every page, paragraph, and word read at me, sir. Mr. Dark took time to light a cigarette and blow smoke toward the no-smoking sign, then at Will's father. Do you really imagine that books can harm me? Is naivety really your armor? Here. And before Charles Holloway could move, Mr. Dark ran lightly forward and took the Bible, held it in his 2 hands. Aren't you surprised? See, I touch, hold, even read from it. Mr. Dark blew smoke on the pages as he rifled them. Do you expect me to fall away into so many dead sea scrolls of flesh before you? Myths, unfortunately, are just that. Life, and by life I could mean so many fascinating things, goes on, makes shift for itself, survives wildly, and I not the least wild among many. Your King James and his literary version of some rather stuffy poetic materials is worth just about as much of this of my time and sweat. Mr. Dark hurled the Bible into a waste paper basket and did not look at it again. I hear your heart beating rapidly, said Mr. Dark. My ears are not so finely tuned as the gypsies, but they hear. Your eyes jump beyond my shoulder. The boys hide out there in the warrens. Good. I would not wish for their escape. Not that anyone would believe their gibberings. In fact, it's a good advertisement for our shows. People titillate, night sweat, and then come prowling down to look us over, lick their lips, and wonder about investing in our special securities. You came, you prowled, and it wasn't just for curiosity. How old are you? Charles Holloway pressed his lips shut. 50, purred Mr. Dark. 51, he murmured. 52? Like to be younger? No! No need to yell. Politely, please. Mr. Dark hummed, strolling the room, running his hand over books as if they were years to be counted. Oh, It's nice to be young, really. Wouldn't 40 be nice again? 40's 10 years nicer than 50. And the 30's 20 years nicer by an incredible long shot. I won't listen! Charles Holloway shut his eyes. Mr. Dark tilted his head, sucked on his cigarette, and observed. Strange. You shut your eyes not to listen. Clapping your hands over your ears would be better. Will's father clapped his hands to his ears, but the voice came through. Tell you what, Mr. Dark said, casually waving his cigarette. If you help me within 15 seconds, I'll give you your 40th birthday. 10 seconds, you can celebrate 35. A rare young age. A stripling, almost, by comparison. I'll start counting, and by my watch, and by God, if you should jump to it, lend a hand, I might just cut 30 years off your life. Bargains galore, as the posters say. Think of it. Starting all over again, everything fine and new and glorious, all the things to be done and thought and savored again. Last chance. Here goes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Charles Holloway hunched away, half-crouched, propped hard against the shelves, grinding his teeth to drown the sound of counting. You're losing out, old man. My dear old fellow, said Mr. Dark. 5, losing. 6, losing very much. 7, really losing. 8, frittering away. 9, 10, my God, you fool. 11, Holloway. 12, almost gone. 13, gone. 14, lost. 15, lost forever. Mr. Dark put down his arm with the watch on it. Charles Holloway, gasping, had turned away to bury his face in the smell of ancient books, the feel of old and comfortable leather, the taste of funeral dust and pressed flowers. Mr. Dark stood in the doorway now, on his way out. Stay here, he directed. Listen to your heart. I'll send someone to fix it. But first, the boys. The crowd of unsleeping creatures, saddled upon tall flesh, strode quietly forth into darkness, borne with and all over upon Mr. Dark. Their cries and whines of utterances of vague but excruciating excitement sounded in his husky summoning. Boys? Are you there? Wherever you are, answer. Charles Holloway sprang forward, then felt the room spin and whirl him as that soft, that easy, that most pleasant voice of Mr. Dark went calling through the dark. Charles Holloway fell against a chair, thought, Listen, my heart, sank down to his knees, and he said, Listen to my heart, it explodes, oh God, it's tearing free, and could not follow. The illustrated man trod cat-soft in the labyrinths of shelved and darkly waiting books. Boys. Hear me? Silence. Boys. Chapter 42. Ooh, tea break. Okay. Somewhere, in the recumbent solitudes of the motionless but teeming millions of books, lost in 24 turns right, 36 turns left, down aisles through corridors toward dead ends, locked doors, half-empty shelves, somewhere in the literary soot of Dickens' London or Dostoevsky's Moscow, or the steps beyond, somewhere in the volumed dust of Atlas or Geographic, sneezes pent but set like traps, the boys crouched, stood, lay sweating in cool and constant brine. Somewhere hidden, Jim thought, he's coming. Somewhere hidden, Will thought, he's near. Boys. Mr. Dark came carrying his panoply of friends, his jewel-cased assortment of calligraphal reptiles which lay sunning themselves at midnight on his flesh. With him strode the stitch-inked Tyrannosaurus Rex, which leant to his haunches, a machined and ancient wellspring of mineral oil glide. As the thunder lizard strode, all glass-speed pomp, so strode Mr. Dark, armored with the vile lightning scribbles of carnivores and sheep blasted by that thunder, and a run before storms of juggernaut flesh. It was the pterodactyl kite and scythe which raised his arms almost to fly the marbled vaults, and with the inked and stenciled flash-burnt shapes of pistoned or bladed doom came his usual crowd of hanger-ons, spectators gripped to each limb, seated on shoulder blades, peering from his jungled chest, hung up upside down in microscopic millions in his armpit vaults, screaming bat screams from encounters, ready for the hunt, and if need be, the kill. Like a black tidal wave upon a bleak shore, a dark tumult and filled with phosphorescent beauties and badly spoiled dreams, Mr. Dark sounded and hissed, his feet, his legs, his body, his sharp face forward. Boys. Immensely patient. That soft voice, ever the warmest friend to chilly creatures burrowed away, nested among dry books, so he scuttered, crept, scurried, stalked, tiptoed, wafted, stood immensely still among the primates, the Egyptian monuments to bestial gods, brushed black histories of dead Africa, stayed a while in Asia, then sauntered on to newer lands. Boys, I know you hear me. The sign reads silence, so I'll whisper. One of you still wants what we offer. Eh? Jim, thought Will. Me, thought Jim. No, oh no, not me. Come out. Mr. Dark purred, the air through his teeth. I guarantee rewards. Whoever turns himself in wins it all. Bangity bang. My heart, thought Jim. Is that me, thought Will, or Jim? I hear you. Mr. Dark's lips quivered. Closer now. Will? Jim? Isn't it Jim who's the smart one? Come along, boy. No, thought Will. I don't know anything, thought Jim wildly. Jim, yes. Mr. Dark wheeled in a new direction. Jim, show me where your friend is. Softly. We'll shut him up. Give you the ride that would have been his if he'd used his head, right, Jim? Dove voice cooing. Closer. I hear your heart jump. Stop, thought Will to his chest. Stop. Jim clenched his breath. Stop. I wonder. Are you in this alcove? Mr. Dark let the peculiar gravity of a certain group of stacks tug him forward. Are you here, Jim? Or over behind? He shoved a trolley of books mindlessly off on rubber rollers to bump through the night. A long way off, it crashed and spilled its contents to the floor like so many dead black ravens. Smart hide-and-seekers both, said Mr. Dark, but someone's smarter. Did you hear the carousel calliope tonight? Did you know someone dear to you was down to the carousel? Will? Willie? William. William Holloway, where's your mother tonight? Silence. She was out riding the night wind, Willie William. Around. We put her on. Around. We left her on. Around. You hear, Willie? Around a year, another, around. Dad, thought Will, where are you? In the far room, Charles Holloway, seated, his heart pounding, heard the thought, he won't find them. I won't move unless he does. He can't find him. They won't listen. They won't believe. He'll go away. Your mother, Will, called Mr. Dark softly. Around and around. Can you guess in which direction, Willie? Mr. Dark circled his thin ghost hand in the dark air between the stacks. round and around. And when we let your mother off, boy, and showed her herself in the mirror maze, you should have heard the one single sound she made. She was like a cat with a hairball in her, so big and sticky there was no way to gag it out. No way to scream around the hair coming out her nostrils and ears, her eyes, boy, and her old. The last we saw of her, boy, Willie, she was running off away from what she saw in the mirrors. She'll bang Jim's house door, but when his ma sees a thing 200 years old slobbering at the key, begging the mercy of gunshot death, boy, Jim's ma will gag the same way like a hairballed cat. Sick, but can't be sick, and beat her away. Send her beggaring the streets, where no one will believe, Will, such a kettle of bones and spit. No one will believe this was a Rose Beauty, your kind relation. So, Will, it's up to us to run save her, for we know who she is, right, Will? Right, Will? Right! The dark man's voice hissed away to silence. Very faintly now, somewhere in the library, someone was sobbing. Ah. The illustrated man gasped the air pleasantly from his dark lungs. Yes. Here, he murmured. What? Filed under B for boys? A for adventure? H for hidden? S for secret? T for terrified? Or filed under J for Jim? Or N for nightshade? W for William? H for Holloway? Where are my two precious human books so I may turn their pages, eh? He kicked a place for his right foot on the first shelf of a towering stack. He shoved his right foot in, put his weight there, swung his left foot free. There! His left foot hit the second shelf, knocked space. He climbed. His right foot kicked a hole on the third shelf, plunged books back, and so up and up he climbed, to fourth shelf, to fifth, to sixth, groping dark library heavens, hands clutching shelf boards, then scrabbling higher to leaf night to find boys, if boys there were like bookmarks among books. His right hand, a princely tarantula, garlanded with roses, cracked a book of Bayeux tapestries, spin down the sightless abyss below. It seemed an age before the tapestries struck all askew, a rune of beauty, an avalanche of gold and silver and sky blue thread on the floor. His left hand, reaching the ninth shelf as he panted, grunted, encountered empty space. No books. Boys, are you here on Everest? Silence, except for the faint sobbing. Nearer now. Is it cold here? Colder? Coldest? The eyes of the illustrated man came abreast of the 11th shelf. Like a corpse laid rigid out, face down just 3 inches away, was Jim Nightshade. One shelf further up, in the catacomb, eyes trembling with tears, lay William Holloway. Well, said Mr. Dark. He reached out a hand to pat Will's head. Hello, he said. Chapter 43, and tea break. I love getting to read Mr. Dark's lines. They're so much fun. He's so evil. And he very much enjoys that about himself. Alright, chapter 43. To Will, the palm of the hand that drifted up was like a moon rising. Upon it was a fiery blue-inked portrait of himself. Jim, too, saw a hand before his face. His own picture looked back at him from the palm. The hand with Will's picture grabbed Will. The hand with Jim's picture grabbed Jim. Shrieks and yells. The illustrated man heaved. Twisting, he jumped to the floor. The boys, kicking, yelling, fell with him. They landed on their feet, toppled, collapsed, to be held, reared, set right, fistfuls of their shirts in Mr. Dark's fists. "Jim," he said, "Will, what were you doing up there, boys? Surely not reading." "Dad! Mr. Holloway!" Will's father stepped from the dark. The illustrated man rearranged the boys tenderly under one arm, like kindling, then gazed with genteel curiosity at Charles Holloway, and reached for him. Will's father struck one blow, before his left hand was seized, held, squeezed. As the boys watched shouting, they saw Charles Holloway gasp and fall to one knee. Mr. Dark squeezed the left hand harder, and doing this slowly, certainly, pressured the boys with his other arm, crushing their ribs so air gushed from their mouths. Night spiraled in fiery whirls like a great thumbprint inside Will's eyes. Will's father groaned, sank to both knees, flailing his right arm. "Damn you!" "But," said the carnival owner quietly, "I am already." "Damn you, damn you." "Not words, old man," said Mr. Dark. "Not words in books, or words you say. Real thoughts, real actions. Quick thought, quick action win the day." So, he gave one last mighty clench of his fist. The boys heard Charles Holloway's finger bones crack. He gave a last cry and fell senseless. In one motion, like a solemn pavane, the illustrated man rounded the stacks, the boys, kicking books from shelves under his arms. Will, feeling walls, books, floors fly by, foolishly thought, pressed close, Why, Mr. Dark smells like calliope steam. Both boys were dropped suddenly. Before they could move or regain their breath, each was gripped by the hair on their head and roused marionette-wise to face a window, a street. "Boys, you read Dickens?" Mr. Dark whispered. "Critics hate his coincidences, but we know, don't we? Life's all coincidence. Turn death and happenstance flakes off him like fleas from a killed ox. Look." Both boys writhed in the Iron Maiden clutch of hungry saurians and bristly apes. Will did not know whether to weep with joy or new despair. Both, across the avenue, passing from church, going home, was his mother and Jim's mother. Not on the carousel, not old, crazy, dead in jail, but freshly out in the good October air. She had been not 100 yards away at church during all the last 5 minutes. "Mom!" screamed Will against the hand which, anticipating his cry, clamped tight to his mouth. "Mom," crooned Mr. Dark mockingly, "come save me." "No," thought Will, "save yourself! Run!" But his mother and Jim's mother simply strolled content from the warm church through town. "Mom!" screamed Will again, and some small muffled bleat of it escaped the sweaty paw. Will's mother, 1,000 miles away over at the sidewalk, paused. She couldn't have heard, thought Will, yet she looked over at the library. "Good," sighed Mr. Dark. "Excellent. Fine." "Here," thought Will, "see us, Mom. Call the police." "Why doesn't she look at this window?" asked Mr. Dark quietly, "and see us three standing as for a portrait? Look over, then come running. We'll let her in." Will strangled a sob. No. His mother's gaze trailed from the front entrance to the first floor windows. "Here," said Mr. Dark. "Second floor, a proper coincidence. Let's make it proper." Now Jim's mother was talking. Both women stood together at the curb. No, thought Will. Oh, no. And the women turned and went away into the Saturday night. Will felt the illustrated man slump the tiniest bit. Not much of a coincidence. No crisis, no one saved or lost. Pity. Well, dragging the boy's feet, he glided down to open the front door. Someone waited in the shadows. The lizard hand scurried cold on Will's chin. Holloway, husked the witch's voice. A chameleon perched on Jim's nose. Nightshade, whisked the dry broom voice. Behind her stood the dwarf and the skeleton, silent, shifting, apprehensive. Obedient to the occasion, the boys would have given their best stored yells air, but again, on the instant recognizing their need, the illustrated man trapped the sound before it could issue forth, and nodded curtly to the old dust woman. The witch toppled forward with her seamed black eyes, with her seamed black wax sewn shut iguana eyelids, and her great proboscis with the nostrils caked like tobacco-blackened pipe bowls, her fingers tracing, weaving the silent plinth of symbols on the mind. The boys stared. Her fingernails fluttered, darted, feathered cold winter water air. Her pickled green frog's breath crawled their skin in pimples as she sang softly, mewing, humming, glistening her babes, her boys, her friends of the slick, snail-tracked roof, the straight-flung arrow, the stricken and sky-drowned balloon. Darning needle dragonfly, sew up these mouths so they not speak. Touch, so, her thumbnail stabbed, punched, drew along their lower upper lips until they were pouch shut with invisible thread. Darning needle, dragonfly, sew up these ears so they not hear. Cold sand funneled Will's ears, burying her voice. Muffled, far away, fading, she chanted on with a rustle, tick, tickle, tap, flourish of caliper hands. Moss grew in Jim's ears, swiftly sealing him deep. Darning needle, dragonfly, sew up these eyes so they not see. Her white-hot fingerprints rolled back their stricken eyeballs, to throw the lids down with bangs like great tin doors slammed shut. Will saw a billion flashbulbs explode, then suck to darkness, while the unseeing darning needle insect out beyond somewhere pranced and fizzed like insect drawn to sun-warmed honeypot, as a closeted voice stitched off their senses forever and a day beyond. Darning needle, dragonfly, have done with eye, ear, lip, and tooth, finish hem so dark, mound dust heap with slumber sleep. Now, tie all knots ever so neat, pump silence in blood like sand in river deep. So. The witch, somewhere outside the boys, lowered her hands. The boys stood silent. The illustrated man took his embrace from them and stepped back. The woman from the dust sniffed at her twin triumphs, ran her hand a last loving time over her statues. The dwarf toddled madly about in the boys' shadows, nibbling daintily at their fingernails, softly calling their names. The illustrated man nodded toward the library. The janitor's clock. Stop it. The witch, mouth wide, savoring doom, wandered off into the marble quarry. Mr. Dark said, "Left, right, 1, 2. The boys walked down the steps, the dwarf at Jim's side, the skeleton at Will's. Serene as death, the illustrated man followed. Chapter 44. And tea break. Let me look here. Alright, looks like this is the last chapter of part 2, so this will probably be Well, I'll read this chapter and then we'll probably stop there, just to let everyone know. Chapter 44. Somewhere near, Charles Holloway's hand lay in a white-hot furnace, melted to sheared nerve and pain. He opened his eyes. At the same moment, he heard a great breath as the front door swung shut, and a woman's voice came singing in the hall. Old man, old man, old man, old man. Where his left hand should be was this swelled blood pudding which pulsed with such ecstasies of pain it fed forth his life, his will, his whole attention. He tried to sit up, but the pain hammer-blowed him down again. Old man. Not old. 54's not old, he thought wildly. And here she came on the worn stone floors, her moth fingers tapping, scanning Braille book titles, as her nostrils siphoned the shadows. Charles Holloway hunched and crawled toward the nearest stack, cramming pain back with his tongue. He must climb out of reach, climb where books might be weapons, flung down upon any night-crawling pursuer. Old man, I hear you breathing. She drifted to it on his tide, let her body be summoned by every sibilant hiss of his pain. Old man, feel your hurt. If he could fling the hand, the pain, out the window, where it might lie beating like a heart, summoning her away, tricked to go seek this awful fire. Bent in the street, he imagined her brisking her palms at this throb, an abundant chunk of delirium. But no, the hand stayed, glowed, poisoned the air, hurrying the strange nun-gypsy's tread as she gasped her avaricious mouth most ardently. Damn you, he cried. Get it over with, I'm here! So the witch wheeled, swift as black-clothes dummy on rubber rollers, and swayed over him. He did not even look at her. Such weights and pressures of despair and exertion fought for his attention. He could only free his eyes to watch the inside of his lids, upon which multiple and ever-changing looms of terror jiggled and gamboled. Very well, the whisper bent low. Stop the heart. Why not? He thought vaguely. Slow, she murmured. Yes, he thought. Gulliver, you're okay. My cat. You scream. I'm almost done. You'll be okay. You're gonna jump up here. Okay. Hold on, cat break. Well, there you go. Cat break. Kisses for Gulliver. Okay. Slow, she murmured. Yes, he thought. Slow, very slow. His heart, once bolting, now fell away to a strange disease, disquiet, then quiet, then ease. Much more slow, she suggested. Tired, yes. You hear that heart? He wondered. His heart heard. Like a tight fist, it began to relax, a finger at a time. Stop for all good. Forget all for good. She whispered. Well, why not? Slower, slowest. His heart stumbled. And then, for no reason, perhaps for a last look around, because he did want to get rid of the pain, and sleep was the only way to do that, Charles Holloway opened his eyes. he saw the witch. He saw her fingers working at the air, his face, his body, the heart within his body, and the soul within the heart. Her swamp breath flooded him while, with immense curiosity, he watched the poison drizzle from her lips, counted the folds in her stitch-wrinkled eyes, the Gia monster neck, the mummy linen ears, the dry rivulet river sand brow. Never in his life had he focused so nearly to a person, as if she were a puzzle, which, once touched together, might show life's greatest secret. The solution was in her. It would all spring clear this moment. No, the next. No, the next. Watch her scorpion fingers, hear her chant as she diddled the air. Yes, diddled it. Yes, diddled. Was it tickling? Tickling. Slow, she whispered. Slow. And his obedient heart pulled rein. Diddle tickle went her fingers. Charles Holloway snorted. Faintly, he giggled. He caught this. Why am I giggling at such a time? The witch pulled back the merest quarter of an inch as if some strange but hidden electric light socket had touched the wet whirl. Give shock. Charles Holloway saw but did not see her flinch. Sensed it, but seemed in no way to consider her withdrawal, for, immediately seizing the initiative, she flung herself forward, not touching but mutely gesticulating at his chest, as if one might try to spell an antique clock pendulum. "Slow!" she cried. Senselessly, he permitted an idiot smile to balloon itself up from somewhere, to attach itself with careless ease under his nose. "Slowest!" Her new fever, her anxiety, which changed itself to anger, was even more of a toy to him. A part of his attention, a secret until now, leaned forward to scan every pore of her Halloween face. Somehow, irresistibly, the prime thing was, nothing mattered. Life, in the end, seemed a prank of such size you could only stand off at this end of the corridor to note its meaningless length and its quite unnecessary height. A mountain built to such ridiculous immensities you were dwarfed in its shadow and mocking of its pomp. So with death this near, he thought, numbly but purely upon a billion vanities, arrivals, departures, idiot excursions of boy, man, and old man goat. He had gathered and stacked in all manner of foibles, devices, playthings of his egotism, and now, between all the silly corridors of books and the toys of his life, swayed, and none more grotesque than this thing named witch gypsy reader of dust, tickling. That's what, just tickling the air. Fool, didn't she know what she was doing? He opened his mouth. Of itself, like a child born of an unsuspecting parent, one single raw laugh broke free. The witch swooned back. Charles Holloway did not see. He was far too busy letting the joke rush through his fingers, letting hilarity spring forth of its own volition along his throat, eyes squeezed shut. There it flew, whipping shrapnel in all directions. "You!" he cried to no one, everyone, himself, her, them, it, all. "Funny! You!" "No," the witch protested. "Stop tickling," he gasped. "Not!" She lunged back frantically. "Not asleep! Slow! Very slow!" "No! Tickling is all it is for sure," he roared. "Oh, stop!" "Yes! Stop heart!" she squealed. "Stop blood!" Her own heart must have shaken like a tambourine. Her hands shook in mid-gesticulation. She froze and became aware of the silly fingers. "Oh my God," he wept beautiful glad tears. "Get off my ribs. Go on, my heart." "Your heart, yes." God, he popped his eyes wide, gulped air, released more soap and water, washing everything clear, incredibly clean. "Toys, the key sticks out your back. Who wound you up?" And the largest roar of all flung at the woman, burnt her hands, seared her face, or so it seemed, for she seized herself as from a blast furnace, wrapped her fried hands in Egyptian rags, gripped her dry dugs, skipped back, gave pause, then started a slow retreat. nudged, pushed, pummeled, inch by inch, foot by foot, clattering book racks, shelves, fumbling for handholds on volumes that thrashed free as she scrambled them down. Her brow knocked dim histories, vain theories, duned up time-promised but compromised years. Chased, bruised, beaten by his laughing which echoed, rang, swam to fill the marble vaults, she whirled at last, claws razoring the wild air, and fled to fall downstairs. A moment later she managed to cram herself through the front door, which slammed. Her fall, the door slam, almost broke his frame with laughter. Oh, God, please stop yourself, he begged of his hilarity. And thus begged, his humor let be. In mid-roar, at last, all faded to honest laughter, pleasant chuckling, faint giggling, then, softly and with great contentment, receiving and giving breath, shaking his happy, weary head, the good ache of action in his throat and ribs gone from his crumpled hand. He lay against the stacks, had leaned to some dear befriending book, the tears of releasing mirth salting his cheeks, and suddenly he knew her gone. Why? He wondered. What did I do? With one last bark of mirth, he rose up slow. Oh, what's happened? Oh, God, let's get it clear. First the drugstore, a half-dozen aspirin to cure this hand for an hour, then think. In the last 5 minutes you did win something, didn't you? What's victory taste like? Think. Try to remember. And smiling a new smile at the ridiculous dead animal left hand nestled in his right crooked elbow, he hurried down the night corridors and out into town. Alright. And then after that we will be starting part 3, Departures. But, I think that's good enough for this stream. Absolutely, no problem. I love reading that book so much, so I'm so glad to share it with you guys, and I'm so glad to be able to share it now that my stream is working again. Let's see here. Who can we raid? Who have we got? Oh, Anthropology is doing The Legend of Zelda. That seems like a good one. I don't think I've ever rated them before either, so perfect. Oh, just want to make sure that I send you guys to a good place. Looks like another Skello homie. I've not watched many of their things, but Skello homie with some more spooky vibes, so I think that's where I'm gonna send you guys. Make sure I spelled it right. Alright. Enjoy your guys' time there. Thank you so much for hanging out and listening to me read. I really appreciated it. And I will be streaming tomorrow. So, I'll see you then. Have a good night. Happy Halloween. I'll be reading more of this, hopefully soon, by the way. Alright, anyway. Have a good night. Goodbye.